I'll continue this later.
Good morning, everybody. This is Gary Schulteis, the president of Global eLearning. Welcome to our 2021 series on learning and development, highlights in the field with our thought leaders. We're doing this every month from May through November. My colleague, Matt Patterson, is the vice president of Global eLearning in the global sales. He is joining us on this. Good morning, Matt, to you.
Good morning, Gary.
And we are very proud to have as our featured speaker for this June 15th show, a gentleman who is the executive vice president and the executive director of the Learning Guild, David Kelly. And David is, his organization is a conference and exhibitions in which we participate in. It's been a great privilege to have known him for several years, to watch how he organizes very large events, and truly a thought leader in this field. So David, welcome to our webinar today. We really appreciate your time and joining us.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. It's always great to participate in these conversations and great to spend some time with you today.
Yeah, well, listen, just to get started, we just want to ask you, we have had a conversation with you back in November. We had a day-long webinar series, and how are things going for you? How are things going for the Learning Guild?
You know, things are going well. I mean, I generally answer that question by saying it's going as well as can be expected for someone whose primary business is to bring thousands of people together to a single place in the midst of a pandemic. So given that context, we've had some significant challenges, but I think we've done very well, both internally and with our community, of supporting everybody through their needs. On a personal level, I think I'm doing very well. I think we've all been through a lot in the last 15, 18 months, depending on where you are, where it started from. I think perspectives change. I think we've all learned a lot, and I think the way that I view both a lot of things in the way that I live my life and the way that I work and approach my work have been forever changed based on the last couple of months, last couple of years, I should say.
Is there some type of marker? I mean, we're all going to look back and we're going to say, you know, is there something that was that pivot point that is exhibited in my life or in my company's life that we will always remember? It'll be that go-to thing. This is what changed for me, or this is what changed for the organization. Is there something like that that's evolving for you already that you can see kind of post-pandemic?
Sure. So I think there's two aspects, two answers to that question I would give you, and both of them kind of straddle the worlds of work and life in general. On the front end, I think for many of us, myself included, we've been forced through the disruptions of the pandemic to really look at the world through another person's lens, to really, I think empathy has become more important than ever, but many of us have been forced into the place of empathy that we haven't been comfortable in before. Even something as simple as mask wearing in the last year has very much changed the lens through which I personally view things. You know, I'm not a high risk individual, and I've never really been overly concerned with my personal risks attached to the risks of the pandemic and COVID. But I'm very concerned about my ability to give it to someone who is high risk, and looking at the world through that lens of, it's not about me and how this can impact me. It's about how it can impact not only those I care about, but those I encounter every single day. And that lens of just looking at the world through other people I'm hoping, I know it's going to stick with me, and I know it impacts just the way I look at it. It amplifies how I view that in my work every single day. I hope as a culture that becomes part of it.
Yeah.
I am also the person, and I'll be careful about how I say this, because obviously we're coming through a very, very tragic period across the globe with a lot of significant challenges, huge losses of life and impacts to people. I mean, I have members of my extended family that have passed away as a result of COVID,
Oh,
and
wow. I'm sorry.
yeah, it's been hard for a lot of people. My son, who's 12, had it. Thankfully, he's fine, but he's got some lingering things. So I've seen firsthand the impact of this. So I don't want to mitigate in any way, dilute the tragedies of the last couple of months.
Mhm.
But I am someone who, no matter what the situation is, will always ask myself the question of, well, what's the opportunity in this? One of my favorite quotes is one that's within every crisis there are seeds of opportunity, and even something like this, there are seeds of opportunity. And I do think that one of the things that will be a marker for our industry, for the guild, for things of that sort, is many of us were pushed into a very uncomfortable place. We were pushed outside of our comfort zone by the disruptions. We all had to figure things out, and there was a lot of interesting and innovative solutions that came out of that. There were organizations that had always believed culturally or through practice that we don't do things like that here. We can possibly be a remote organization. We can possibly handle this in-person experience in a virtual manner. And then suddenly we had no choice but to figure it out. And I think we saw some really innovative solutions, and we saw organizations pushed outside of their comfort zone to play in spaces they haven't played before. And I do hope that that's going to have a long-lasting positive effect for how we view the work that we do and how we approach our work as we go forward.
That's a great point. I heard a commentary by a high official in one of the big insurance companies in the United States who said, we had a 3-year plan for rolling out e-learning modules to replace some of our instructor-led, and then we had to roll them out in 6 weeks. So it is remarkable, and they were saying how remarkable it was that everybody stepped up to be able to make something happen in the midst of, in a sense, of crisis. When you're used to dealing with people face to face, all of a sudden you can't do that. So, which brings me to the next point. I'd like to ask you about last year when this pandemic struck and things were getting closed down. Kind of the immediate response within the learning and development field was that one of the great benefactors was going to be e-learning. E-learning was going to all of a sudden rise to be something so important and so invaluable. And everyone was basically saying, hey, if you're in the e-learning field, this is a boondoggle for you. Now that we've gone 15 months into it, and I know we have seen it in the industry, an investment into things. But from your perspective, has it really materialized into something where instructor-led type of material is now all going to e-learning? Has it really accelerated? Has it really taken place like we thought it would?
So there's a couple of different angles to how I would respond to that. The first is there definitely has been more investment and momentum through the space. There was no choice that there had to be as face-to-face went away. So as we start becoming closer toward being able to return or to have the option to return to in-person events, in-person offices, in-person interactions in general, the question is, are we going to go back to the way things were beforehand? And I don't think we will, for a couple of reasons. One is echoing what I said earlier. I think a lot of organizations were pushed into a space of what I would oversimplify by saying that's not how we do things here. And then suddenly you had no choice, but you got to do it that way now. And they discovered, well, this works. This is something we didn't think we could do this before, but we had no choice. And we discovered it works, and now it's just part of what they do. So while I do think face-to-face interactions and face-to-face experiences are going to come back, where we had no choice, and I do think some of what we're doing virtually right now will come back to face-to-face. Virtual is not going to go away, even for those organizations that didn't do it before. It's not going to go away. I think we'll be in a position where organizations will be better positioned to choose the right right methodology for anything, right? Rather than just defaulting to face-to-face, they'll be able to ask the question of, well, does it need to be face-to-face? Can we do this in a virtual format? Another aspect to the question that I would add is, I do think that while there was this by necessity push to e-learning, I think that that comes with risk and rewards. And I think we've seen that in different pockets of industries and sectors. What I mean by risk and rewards is there's a huge opportunity that the fact that the whole world had to go online in simple terms, because we couldn't meet face to face. But there are definitive risks and rewards in that. I'll give you a very personal example of that. What I mean, I think a lot of organizations went through this. For me, I live in the New York area, and the world turned upside down in March, around the time when everything went into it. And my kids' schools they couldn't meet in person like many of them and had to go home. And I give my kids' schools a lot of credit. They did a really impressive job of just pivoting to online and getting school to happen every single day. And I give the educators around the world a huge amount of credit. I mean, both of my kids' schools, the children have iPads, so there was a standardization there, so they had that huge advantage. I don't know how schools that don't have something like that were able to do this. I give the educators and teachers huge amounts of kudos for what they were able to do. And they figured it out. They got through the year. And I got another thing I'll give my children's schools credit for is in the middle of, after the school year ended in June, they sent an email out to teachers, knowing that this, to all the parents, knowing that this was going to continue into the fall, and asked, how did we do? What did you think? And my answer to every single question was, it really depends on when you're asking me this question. And the last answer I put in was, and if you want to know why I keep giving you the same answer, just give me a call. I'm happy to talk through it. And they a lot of the administrators there, they know me, so they saw the name. We're just like, all right, we'll give Mr. Kelly a call. He obviously wants us to give him a call. So when I spoke to them, they were like, all right, so what did you mean? And I said, well, here's the thing. I said, my answer to that question is very different in March than it is in September. In March, the measurement of success was, did school happen today? And because it was so unexpected, and the fact that you were able to have school happen every single day, I give you huge amounts of credit, and you get an A for that. But because you were completely off guard, and that was the measurement. But you're not caught off guard in September. You got a whole summer to prepare for what September is. So if you're telling me that what you did in March, and I say you did a great job, you're going to do that in September, you didn't do a great job in September, because now I don't want you to just make school happen. I want you to make school happen effectively. I want you to make school happen in a more productive manner. And there are a lot of things that should be different come September, because one of the phrases that popped up in the early portions of the pandemic that I really wish we spent a little bit more time paying attention to was this idea of emergency remote teaching, which is what happened in March. That it was just a matter of, we turned on Zoom and we figured it out. But emergency remote teaching is very different than effective e-learning and effective virtual classroom experiences. And I do think that for a lot of organizations, the opportunity was the fact that both the opportunity and the risk was the fact that e-learning and virtual classroom experiences were placed in the spotlight like never before. And for a lot of organizations that did it really well, they harnessed the opportunity, and they were just like, this is a really great experience. We should add this to our curriculum. We should be doing this all the time. And the ones that weren't able to harness that opportunity and just turned on Zoom and just broadcast the classroom. I mean, there was a day with one of the teachers that I walked into my son's room. I was like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm in class. I'm like, why is your camera pointing towards the ceiling of the classroom? It's not going to work. They got to fix that. And things like that. Like, if that's the experience, I mean, that was an isolated incident at my kid's school. But for a lot of, if that's what e-learning looked like and virtual support looked like, you're going to have a lot of people who that's what online learning means to them, because that's the experience that they had. And that's unfortunate. So I do think there are a lot of organizations that harness the opportunity of showcasing what online learning can be and how it can enhance a learning strategy and enhance the education initiatives that we have. I also think that there are a lot of organizations that unfortunately didn't do that, which just kind of added to the perception that online learning is somehow less than in-person learning.
Yeah. So along those lines, David, we're on this crisis breeds innovation type conversation right now, right? What have you seen that's been innovative in the e-learning industry over these past 15, 18 months that you think, you know what, this will be more mainstream now because it's really been effective? Is there anything out there that you think that maybe was out there but wasn't well adopted before, or perhaps it is brand new that you think, yeah, this is going to be adapted, this is going to take and stick?
So I think there's a couple of things. One is, and I don't know that we've seen the benefits of this yet, but there's an enormous amount of investment for obvious reasons going into virtual and asynchronous learning opportunities. And those platforms have been advancing rapidly as they try to catch up to the demand and institute a lot of things. And even the platforms that we use in some of the online events that we do, every time we do an online event, and we do them very, very frequently, we have to check the release notes to see what's changed. I mean, how many times have you, even something as simple as Zoom, how many times have you opened up Zoom and it's like, here's the update, 37 new things that happened since yesterday. You know, they're all moving very, very quickly. And I think that level of innovation is good. Some of the stuff that I think is going to stick with us and helping push the industry forward, which I'm excited about. One is that we're seeing people use these tools in different ways, to kind of look at these tools, and yes, being able to turn on a Zoom camera and have conversations is great, but how can we use them in a way that gets people more engaged? It's not a matter of what does this tool do, but how can we use this tool? Even something as simple as what we're doing right now, which is just a broadcast, the framing of how we're doing things and the production value of what we're doing things here adds a level of engagement. The way that people can use chat and things of that sort, adding a level of engagement. And we're seeing people look at these tools and saying, how can I leverage the different functionalities of this tool to make the most engaging experience that we possibly can? And the shift to remote work and finding ways for people to engage in different work, different environments in a virtual capacity. I think that that's going to stay with us, and I think we'll continue to see that layer of innovation. I'll also say that I think some of the stuff that we're doing, you know, one of the things that does excite me about pushing our industry forward is everybody went online simultaneously. And everybody basically started, you know, the idea of doing just a webinar, everybody started doing webinars, and it became a commoditized thing. And if everybody's doing webinars, how do you stand out? How do you make yours different? How do you make yours more valuable in that increasingly competitive landscape? I don't mean competitive from a sales perspective. I mean competitive from an attention economy standpoint. Yeah. And therefore, you found people who were finding ways to just, all right, well, we can't just turn on a camera and do a webinar anymore. How can we make it more compelling? How can we make things more interesting in an environment where everybody's online? Everybody needed to build a better mousetrap and to kind of push their own practice further, just because in order, if everybody's up here, then I want mine to be a little bit higher so that I stand out a little bit. And I think that sort of innovation has just pushed the entire industry forward.
David, from the Learning Guild standpoint, I know of a few things that I could see that the Learning Guild was doing a little different to stay engaged with its members, with all of its activities. Are there some things that you did that were specifically for the pandemic that may go away? Or are there things that are now permanent that the Learning Guild is doing because you found it to be a way of engaging remotely or virtually that is just as effective as perhaps having one of your conferences where you bring a large group of people together? What's the Learning Guild going forward? Is some things that you've done in the last year going to be permanent?
So the short answer is yes. A lot of the things that we did in the last 18 months will be sticking with us long term. We've opened some new doors that we don't feel the need to close going forward. We've made mistakes along the way that we've learned, like a lot of organizations. I think that on the positive end, some of the stuff that we've done in the last year will definitely stay with us. I mean, I definitely think as time goes on, we will be revisiting how much online content we do, because I do think that there's at least within our community, you have to be conscious of fatigue and how much stuff that you're putting out there and how much people can consume. So the frequency of what we've done is as more and more face-to-face interactions are able to come, we might do a little bit less because there's just people are able to experience different things. I think that like I was saying before, that when everybody goes online, you got to find ways to differentiate yourself. And I do think that that's one of the things that's going to stick with us. One of the things that was really interesting for us from a learning experience, when the world went south in March of 2019, was it? Time has no meaning at this point, whatever. But the United States shut down 2 weeks before our learning solutions, about 2 to 3 weeks before our learning solutions conference in Orlando. So and admittedly, like many organizations, we were caught off guard. We were kind of looking at it from the standpoint as things were starting to develop around the world. We were having conversations around, is this going to affect attendance? Is it going to be smaller? Are we going to have to worry about, the commitments we've made to hotels in terms of the number of rooms that we have? It wasn't even on our radar that it may not happen at all. It wasn't on our radar. And it went from, how are we going to make this work with a smaller amount of people, to, oh my goodness, this isn't going to happen, in like a 3-day period. Like, it was just that our perspective changed. And so one of the things that the lens that has changed for us, and I think for a lot of organizations, this journey that I'll very quickly paint, I think a lot of us have gone through, because learning solutions was gone. We got to figure out, well, how do we deliver that experience? How do we take this event and just deliver it to people in an online capacity? And we did that for learning solutions, and we made it happen. And I give my team a tremendous amount of credit for what they were able to accomplish very quickly to deliver the value that people expect from a conference like that in an online format. And as we debriefed it afterwards, one of the things we kind of thought of through that, we looked at what worked, what didn't work. And one of the first mistakes that we admittedly made, granted, I'll cut us a lot of slack because of the time period we had to live in, but we started from a place of this experience over here, that's face-to-face, how do we bring that online? And I'll say that was the wrong question to be starting from, because it assumed that was the experience, that we started from this face-to-face thing, we needed to bring it on. And when we started looking at the fall events and realizing that they were at risk, we started with a different question. We looked and said, all right, so these events, what if it was digital first? What can we do? What are the opportunities in a digital environment that you couldn't do in a face-to-face? Instead of how do we take this face-to-face experience and adapt it so that it can come here, what if we started from the digital space? What can we do digitally that we could never do in a face-to-face environment? What are the new opportunities here? And we can take that to a level of rebranding the event so that it shaped not only our expectations in developing it, but at the expectations of the attendees. That DevLearn, which was the DevLearn Conference and Expo, became the DevLearn digital experience. It was digital first. And even that branding just shaped the lens through which we looked at it and said, this is a digital experience. What does that mean? How is that different? And new things that would not have come up had we not reshaped our thinking. New ideas, new programmatic elements, new things that we would never have thought of, and it had not been forced to go down this route, were part of that event. And each event that we've had to do over the last year and a half has built upon that this idea of a digital experience. What does it mean? It enabled us to be experimental. It created a safe space where we could try different things. Some of it worked, some of it didn't, but it was a very transparent experiment within that. And it enabled us to differentiate what it meant to do a digital experience event as compared to a face-to-face conference. And as we start looking forward to the future, while I'm very optimistic and looking very much forward to the fall, where we anticipate DevLearn and Learning 2021, and as well as all of our events in 2022, to be able to be hosted in a safe and healthy environment in person, we look at this digital experience that we did, and we're like, well, where's that going to plug in 2022? Where's the space that we can give this new thing that we've developed a space to exist. Because one of the huge benefits we saw coming out of the pandemic was the number of people that are very, very passionate about the type of stuff that we do, the type of events that we host, that just through the geography and budget limitations can never get to a face-to-face event. So when we went online, we were discovering that there were thousands of people all around the world who were like, I can finally participate in DevLearn. I can finally do these things.
Right.
And now that we're able to gather in person again, we don't want to just leave those people to the side again. We want them to continue to engage. So we're going to find ways to these new online digital experiences that we've created. That's now part of the portfolio. In the same way that I was kind of saying earlier, the pie has gotten bigger for a lot of organizations. We were pushed into spaces that we weren't operating in before. And just because we can go back to what we were doing before doesn't mean we let that go. We keep that as part of a new experience that we can deliver to people.
Yeah, so it sounds to me like you're saying, and this goes for me too, because I'm in sales, right? And just as much as learning, we went from doing in-person, face-to-face, hey, how are you? How can we help you type things to, oh, I'm talking to you online now and figuring this out. And it sounds like there's two different, we live in a divisive world right now. So there's essentially two different trains of thought, right? One camp says, we're never going back to it. I want to stay remote. I don't want to see a salesperson. And another camp says, they're itching to get out there. They're itching to see things. And I would think you're seeing the same thing. I'm kind of wondering here now that you've been talking about it, because are you seeing a lot of participants saying, all right, I'm ready to attend DevLearn in person. I'm ready to do this. Or what are your thoughts there? What are you seeing from your perspective?
Yeah, so there is definitely a lot of energy, both from conference attendees and exhibitors, to return to in-person events. There's trepidation, understandably, but people, at least within the United States, see the trajectory of where things are going. There's increased optimism. I think we are all or many of us are on a certain level, just looking forward to the normalcy of it, to just, we've been isolated for so long. As much as we've been using technology in tremendous ways to stay connected with one another, there's just nothing like the energy of being together in person in an in-person event, or just in the same space. So we do see a tremendous amount of interest in that. You're absolutely right that there are two sides to the coin. There are other people who are just like, not yet. I mean, the old adage that exists for a lot of people is like, yeah, we need to change, but you go first. I think we're going to see a lot of that, where there's, and even kidding aside, as much as I'm passionate about it, I'm looking forward to getting back to this. I see it even in my own family, that everyone's got their line of what type of experiences, or just to get back to this, where you're being pushed against your own comfort level. Yeah. And even in my own family, like, we've encountered that where my wife went to the movies for the first time in a year and a half this past weekend, and she was like, I don't know if I feel like I'm not ready for that yet. I'm not sure yet. And she only went because of reduced capacities and the fact that she's vaccinated. But it was obvious she was going up against her limit there of, am I ready for that yet? And one of the things that ultimately made her do it is she spoke to a number of people who were like, oh, I went to a movie. Yeah, I felt the same way, but it was fine. And I wonder, like, I think in my wife's case, had she not had a couple of conversations with family and friends who had already crossed that line and heard that they were okay and they felt comfortable with it, maybe she does, maybe she doesn't. But I think that there are always going to be a certain number of people who they put a line out there, and it's just kind of like, I just want to see that other people are doing it and it's okay first. Yeah. And I think that we'll see that a lot this year as we return to in-person events, which is perfectly natural. That I think a lot of people are going to want to see an event like DevLearn happen. And like, hey, I'll be as an event producer. Last week there was an event in Las Vegas called the World of Concrete. I'm really not that engaged in the world of concrete. One of the biggest events that has happened in Las Vegas that since the pandemic. It's like the largest event that's happened in Las Vegas since. And I was watching that event very closely because I wanted to see how people reacted. I wanted to see. I think many of us are very familiar with the start, at least in the United States. There was I forget what conference it was, but it was like mainstream news of this conference in Boston where somebody was positive, and you could just follow the map of how those people got on planes and went home. And we're not in that place, at least in the United States right now, where we have that sort of super spreader possibility. But we're watching it. We watch those sorts of things. How is the world going? There are events that are going on right now. We're paying very close attention to the lessons that they're learning, and how it's going to make us all return to these events in a way that is safe and comfortable for people.
You mentioned something, David, that struck me, and that is we're probably looking at a world in which there has to be an integrated way of presentation. So, for instance, I'm sure this might be part of the deal with DevLearn this October, but for us, we do a global summit because we have employees all over the world, and we try to bring everybody together for one event, for a 4-5 day event where we're all sitting together, where we really get to touch one another and just talk over things. And our event this year is in August, and not everybody's able to attend. And in the past, being kind of old-fashioned, I would look at it as saying, well, I'm very sorry, we just can't be a part of this, because you're not coming to be a part of this face-to-face meeting. And now I think because of the pandemic, we're able to say both can happen at the same time. We can have a face-to-face conference in which we can pipe in people from all over the world to also participate. We now understand the technology better. So I'm looking forward to the fact that I don't have to say, well, I'm sorry, you can't be a part of this. And now looking at saying, even though you can't come because the borders are closed, let's say in a country like Ukraine, they cannot come out from, COVID is still very much persistent there. COVID is very persistent in Brazil and Argentina. There are some places where people cannot travel from or travel to, but they can still participate because we now understand how to integrate the technology with the actual physical conference so that everybody can participate together. So,
yeah, so it's interesting. I agree with you. I also do think that is a significant area of growth that we still have yet to explore. So, for instance, and give me a minute to just explain what I mean by that. So, for instance, for DevLearn this year, we're focusing on the in-person experience, and we are looking at how we can provide an experience for those who can't join us in person. But we've made the decision to not have it be live streamed from DevLearn, to have a dedicated online experience for people who can't join us at our fall events in person. And there's a reason for that, because there's two reasons for that. One is, no matter when you have both of those, I don't think that there's a technology yet. First off, the resources to support both of those at the same time is a lot. To have people who are fully invested in supporting the online event, either you have people who are supporting both the online audience and the virtual audience at the same time, and nobody's getting the full attention, and it becomes and the attention they get is diluted, or you have to double your resources and have people giving it full support in both areas. So it's not as simple as just bringing in a live stream, although for a lot of organizations they do that. But in my experience and the experience of what we've seen here, what you have is less of I'm participating in DevLearn, or in this particular example, less I'm participating in DevLearn remotely, and more I'm watching DevLearn happen remotely. Because that's not necessarily, it's still better than nothing, no doubt. But we would rather, it kind of goes back to what I was saying about the digital experience before. We don't want it to be a case of you're a fly on the wall watching this happen. I mean, even the example I gave earlier of my son is like, I walked in the room and the camera, I saw the ceiling of the classroom, was an example of what I'm talking about here. The teacher was so focused on the students that were in the room and providing the experience to there, and anybody who was remote was just watching that experience, and she didn't realize that the laptop was pointed in the wrong way and he couldn't see the teacher and things of that sort. And it winds up, for a lot of what we've seen for these events where it's hybrid from a virtual option for a face-to-face event, the virtual option is more, you get to watch this from home and nobody's really paying attention to engaging them, where what we've done with our digital experience is it's digital first, and we're going to find ways to make this the primary experience for people and engage you appropriately in a digital manner. So there are going to be both models are good. There's not necessarily that one is right or wrong. They're just different. And for us, we wanted to separate the face-to-face experience so that we can focus and deliver the best face-to-face experience that we can, and prioritize the health and safety and comfort of everybody. And then at a separate time, we'll have an online experience for those who couldn't join us in person that is focused, where our attention is fully on that digital experience and leveraging the unique affordances of those technologies to deliver an appropriate experience there where they are the focal people. So I do think that there's options there, but for us, we've made the decision that we want to give those two audiences the individual attention that they need, and to deliver on the unique affordances of those two very different environments of being face-to-face and virtual.
That's good. That's very interesting. Very interesting. David, I had the privilege of hearing you speak earlier this year, in fact, on what I call leadership in action. I think you actually called it something different, but it started with this, I thought it was very clever, a mathematical equation for the term trust. Mm-hmm. And then you moved into all the attributes of leadership, and you called them, in each one of those, you said in action. So it was vision in action, communication in action, all these different innovation in action, all these different attributes of a leader. As you reflect back on those thoughts and that presentation and what you've seen happen over the last 15 months, what attributes now are you advocating? If you were to say, pick two of them, pick three of them that are super important now going forward for leaders to understand and to put into practice.
Sure. Without question, the top of my list right now would be empathy. And the presentation that I gave earlier this year, I believe it was actually called the behaviors of learning leadership. Because for me, I think a lot of times when we talk about learning leadership, we tend to focus on roles or these amorphous ideas, like even empathy, that it's just when we need to be empathetic. Well, what does that look like? You know, we all have an idea of what empathy is, but what does that look like as a practice? How do we put that, as you said, into action? And I do think that that's going to be, empathy is right at the top of my list. I mean, we have to understand that people had to go to when the world is disrupted. Now it's not going back to normal. It's going back to a new disruption. It's going back to that people are they got comfortable over 18 months with the idea of working from home, and now you're telling people to come back, or asking people to come back, depending on your culture. And even those two words, the language is important. There's a big difference in terms of I'm asking people to come back and I'm telling people to come back. And I think we need to be very empathetic about understanding that everybody's got different feelings about what that means. I mean, we're a small team. We run very lean. We've got a couple of dozen members of our team that work, and many of us work remotely. So we've got an even smaller percentage of our team that work remotely. And even with just a couple of dozen people, you've got probably a couple of dozen different perspectives on what they're comfortable with and what it comes into. And I think that we need to hear that from people. We need to understand that people have trepidation and concerns. Even the people who are like, I'm great, I'm vaccinated, I'm happy to see you, come give me a hug. On some level, they've got some concerns around that. And being understanding that of what people are going through, and the mental baggage that a lot of people are carrying from the last couple of years, it's not business as usual. It's not going to be business as usual for a long, long time. And I think empathy and just being empathetic and understanding that people are going to need support, they're going to need time, they're going to need to be heard, so that they can feel comfortable in a return to work and in a return to training and education and in-person training. That's going to be huge. I also do think that, if I was going to narrow it down to another couple that from the last 18 months, I'll give you one answer, but it's kind of a merger of two of the ones that I talked about. I think that as leaders, and especially as learning leaders, there's the need for leaders to demonstrate both innovation and problem solving. And I'll put those kind of two in one thing. because the reality was we were pushed into situations that we've never been in before. Nobody had a script on how to navigate everything that we've went through. So it's not like you had the answers there. You needed to figure it out. And for a lot of us, we needed to just do things that didn't exist in our organization before. We need to figure out, we needed to create something that wasn't there. We needed to find new ways to do things. And I think that for a lot of us, that skill set that we needed to develop, that muscle that we needed to stretch over the last 18 months, is a very, very valuable muscle to keep working on and keep demonstrating those skills for our organizations as we go forward. We were pushed to lean into that space by circumstance, and those circumstances are gradual. The crisis is starting to the urgency of the crisis may be going away, but that doesn't necessarily mean the opportunity of using those skills in a less crisis-driven environment is any less. Those are huge skills that we needed to use those skills just to get us through the day and get us through the week. But now those skills are going to be better used to help us push things forward. That we don't have to do things because we have to and just to make things happen, but we can use those skills to help push our practices and our programs and everything that we're doing forward as individuals, as organizations, and as a field.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And David, to piggyback on that, I think one thing that's often overlooked, and as leaders, it's really critical, and it sounds like you're doing it, and I know for firsthand that Gary's done it, is availability. Mm-hmm. Right? Because that goes along with empathy. If somebody needs something, let's say you have kids and you have to take time out of your day, midday, to help them learn, to help set them up on the computer, to even homeschool them, right? Because a lot of us just got pushed into this to where we have children downstairs and we have to figure out what to do here. Setting availability for your team, for your employees, for everyone around is important. And so I know I could call Gary at 10 o'clock at night and let him know something's happened, right?
Like a tree falling on your house.
Like a tree falling on my house. I can call, my team knows that they can call me whenever they need me. It's an open door. You come and you find me. And I think that's been a key for at least great leadership to really thrive is empathy and availability. Because one without the other, I think it's not quite as effective.
I completely agree. Yeah. Great point.
That's good. David, we're towards the end of our session, and it's been very enlightening. Thank you again for your time on this. And last thing I want to give you the opportunity to talk about is I think your next major event is DevLearn in Las Vegas in October. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you would like to say about how it's going to be organized that might be different than in the past?
Sure. Well, the first thing is it will be. I mean, as much as it'll feel like DevLearn, and it will be DevLearn, we're planning the event through the lens of, given the environment that we're in, how can we make people feel comfortable being there? We obviously want to create a safe environment, but I think as long as things don't pivot in a different direction, I think we're going down a path where we'll be able to run this event, like the requirements associated through this event will be minimal in terms of like social distancing and mask wearing. And that's going to be the floor for us. That's a matter of, all right, well, obviously these are things that we have to be in compliance with, but what do we need to do above and beyond that so that people feel comfortable in an event like this? How are we pivoting it? And we're looking at things like seating arrangements and how are we distributing food and beverage and things of that sort, so that we are creating an environment that enhances the safety for people and gives people the ability to feel safe both in the environment and with each other. We're looking at even something as simple as wristbands that people can wear that communicate someone's comfort level, so that you can very easily see as you approach someone how comfortable they are in this environment.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, just things to emphasize people's comfort. But through that all, it'll be about DevLearn. I mean, we're still fine. It's about what DevLearn is. It's about bringing people together so that we can connect and share and host conversations about how technology is changing. I do think that programmatically it might look a little bit different. I mean, DevLearn's always about shaping what's next, and that trend line of what shaping what next means was very, very disrupted in the last year. About like there's a lot of parts of that conversation of what's next for the world of learning and technology There are new aspects, there are new branches to that tree that didn't exist 2 years ago, and we're looking forward to exploring them as well.
That's great. So you are excited. I mean, as you look towards that October event, are you seeing that there's a lot of excitement from both exhibitors and conference attendees who are all excited about finally, after losing a year last year, having a face-to-face experience?
Absolutely. I mean, we're encouraged by what we're seeing, both in terms of the developments of vaccines and distributions, and what we're seeing in the world in general, at least within the United States. Obviously, there are some still concerns internationally, but within the United States, we're very encouraged. We're also really encouraged by the early engagement that we're seeing. I mean, we're seeing engagement in terms of people registering for the conference and exhibitors committing to being at the show this year. That is in line with what we saw in 2018 and 2019. We're anticipating the event being, just based on people's comfort levels and the economic disruptions that have happened over the last 18 months, that we're anticipating that the event is probably not going to be the same size as it was in 2019, and that's fine. Right now, we're looking at hosting we're not anticipating that the entire community is going to be ready or able to join us in Las Vegas or in Orlando for Learning 2021. But we're planning on hosting the best possible event for those people who can be there. And we're very excited to be doing that. I know myself, as much as I'm looking forward to as much as I want to make sure that even for myself and for my family, that it's going to be a safe and healthy environment for everyone to be there. I am very much looking forward to opening up the conference, being on that general session stage, and just feeling the energy of the community again. And I think a lot of people are really in the same space.
All right. Well, David, thank you again so much for your time, and good luck and all the best with all the planning for DevLearn. We look forward to seeing you there. We love to exhibit there. It's always one of our biggest shows for us personally as a company. So we really appreciate the efforts you're putting together to make sure it's a safe show. So all the best with that. And thank you again for joining us today.
Oh, thank you both. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
All right.
Thanks, David.
Goodbye.